Hi, this is Royce Hall. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Level 12 Software That Works, and I'm joined by Matt Lewellyn. He is the team lead for one of our software development teams, and he is working on a project called Secure Remote Commerce. That's also called Click to Pay. So, Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about that project? What's the value of that, and what we're doing for our client, who is a Fortune 500 fintech company.
So the point of Click to Pay is that traditionally, if you're putting together a merchant website and you have a shopping cart or a checkout of some kind and you want to work with credit cards, traditionally you've had to design your own system of working with MasterCard or working with Visa or American Express, and your code would have to be able to work with all of those card brands in some way or another. The point of Click to Pay is that it wants to standardize, in a sense, the way that all of those card brands work together, so that a single merchant application can talk to all of the card brands the same exact way without having to worry about all the differences between them. So the way it works is the merchant gets loaded up onto each card brand as a profile, and then there's a single secure remote commerce or click to pay application that sits between the merchant and the cards and handles all of the details of the transaction. And that program will talk to each card brand as necessary or present the list of all of the cards that a consumer has registered on the system for all the card brands, and they get to pick the one that they want, and the interface that the user is working with stays consistent throughout the whole workflow.
So in this system, like we're not developing the click-to-pay system itself. That's something that MasterCard, Visa, the card brands have developed. So what is our role in that process?
Right. So each card brand has developed a library of sorts that is designed according to a particular spec that they've all agreed upon as the click-to-pay construct. So our job is to put that system that's in the middle that serves up some of the web pages like user sign-in or listing credit cards to choose from, or I'm returning to a system after having registered somewhere else. Let me get a one-time passcode to log back into the system, and dealing with all of the transaction details and shipping them off to the correct card brand, and then taking that information that comes back and giving it to the merchant application so they can do what they need to with it, recording orders, setting up shipping, what have you. So that our program sits in the middle and is able to talk to all of those card brands' libraries.
Okay, so one of the things that I think Click to Pay talks about is just the seamlessness of it, the speed of the transactions. Is that one of the main purposes of Click to Pay, is to make the user experience easier and faster? Is that correct?
Yes, it is. The main point is to have a consistent workflow for a user. So they're not looking at different screens for MasterCard or Visa. They're not trying to step through the process differently. What the point is that if enough merchants put together integration with an SRC or click-to-pay application, users that are using their sites will go through checkout the exact same way every single time. And they'll have their card already registered on the SRC system. And then when they go to another site that uses SRC, that card will already be there, and they can just one click, pay, and be done.
Okay, so instead of having like a unique, different shopping cart experience for each website that you go to and buy something from, if you have a bunch of people on SRC, the experience will be the same from one to the other. Is that correct?
Yes, the various shopping carts themselves may look different, but the checkout process will be the same from end to end.
Okay, so can you tell me what you're working on right now? What we're doing from a technological standpoint?
Sure, there's a few things. So one is that the the transaction payload itself has to be encrypted, and that encryption has to work with each card brand specifically. We've been working on some of the details to get that working properly so that we have a complete transaction. The card brands also supply sandbox environments, so you can test the SRC program within their system and run test transactions through with more live responses to them. So we've been working on the MasterCard angle of that. We've been working on test coverage in that when you're dealing with transaction details, you want to make sure that all of the pieces of your code have tests that actually run that code and make sure that the results are correct. We are also looking at putting in a way for within the program for merchants to be registered onto those card brands so that those merchants can then use the card brand services.
So what you're building then is, again, we're not building the system that's necessarily processing the card, the SRC, but we're building a system that would make our client a SRC initiator, correct? And then what that's doing is they're setting up their profiles, they're setting up their credit cards, they're setting up all of their personal information so that, you know, our software at that point is kind of part of the boarding process, is what boards people onto the SRC. Is that fair?
Yes, that would be fair. It's the process that boards merchants into using each card brand for the SRC. So each card brand would be available to the merchant only if they have a profile on that card brand's system, and our program will be the one putting that profile in place so that the merchant's checkout page can then say, I've got MasterCard, or I've got MasterCard and Visa, and the user just has that smooth, consistent UI throughout.
So do we have access to the sandbox yet?
We have access to the MasterCard sandbox. We're working on the Visa.
So we've been trying to get that key for a while.
Yes, it's been a while. It's hard to, there are a lot of moving parts to this thing because it's not just you, and it's you and the client that wants to be the SRC initiator. Plus you've got them having conversations with the various card brands, which for now is MasterCard and Visa. Eventually it's going to be Amex, and everybody has their own idea of how the system needs to run, but we get to put it all together and make it work.
So how are you doing that? Can you talk through the process of like how are you figuring out the priorities and working with the client in that situation?
At this point, it's mostly been trying to get involved with the actual discussions with MasterCard or with Visa and be on the line to ask particular questions. About a month ago, we did a UI demo with some MasterCard people on the line so they could see what we had developed so far. That they could see the workflow a user would step through as a new user or as a returning user who already has some cards to list on the page. We were able to show them most of that with a connection to their sandbox environment. So at that point, you know, they provide some feedback as far as pointers on how the workflow could be improved from their perspective. There are various edge cases that have to be considered, like what if a user ends up somehow with more than one profile on the card and they have cards listed for each profile? Well, what do we do with that? And they have to give us some instructions as to how to handle each one of those cases. There's always a possibility that when we ask the same questions to Visa, they may want those cases handled differently. So when we get to that point, we'll have to figure that out.
That sounds pretty interesting. That sounds pretty fun, getting in the middle of MasterCard and Visa. So can you tell me like why we are doing this project? Why is it that, you know, they're not just using internal resources? Is there something behind that, or is that just our good fortune?
Well, I'm pretty sure that it's simply a matter of when their internal resources would have been able to deliver the solution based on their existing priorities and internal bandwidth. I mean, a company like that just has enough projects going on internally and they don't have the resources to add on to that. So this project was a little more of a priority, but wouldn't figure into those resources as they were currently allocated.
To summarize what you just said, the reason why this company came to us, it's not because they didn't have internal resources. It's because they had internal resources, but they were busy doing other things. And this was a priority project. They didn't have the capacity internally to handle it. So they needed somebody that they trusted, somebody that they knew could work in the way that they wanted and could handle, a pretty valuable project. I mean, this is not a small thing to allow, merchants to process, MasterCard, Visa, and those other brands. So it was a priority. It's just they had other things that were tying up their resources.
That's right. It's not a complex project when it comes to the architecture of it. The main work of the project, the bulk of it, is taking all of the documentation from all the sources, like MasterCard, like Visa, and like the organization that put together the SRC protocol to begin with, and putting all that together and taking those code libraries and trying to interact with them, finding all the edge cases, and it's more of a puzzle than a software architecture piece.
Okay, that makes sense. And are there other companies that have already done this, or are we, one of the first companies, or is our client one of the first companies rolling this out? Do you know?
I'm sure that other people are working on this, but I'm not aware of any. The SRC spec is fairly new. I'm not sure exactly how old it is, but it is fairly new. So I don't think there are a lot of solutions out there at this point, if there are any.
Yeah, I think you're right about it being fairly new. Matthias and I were looking at it the other day, and he mentioned that, I think he did a Google search and saw that he was pretty much the only person Googling it. So I don't think there's a whole lot of people that are pursuing that. And as I talk to people in the fintech world, and I specifically asked them about Click-to-Pay and SRC, it's mostly, hey, I've never heard of that, and I'm informing people.
Yes, I think it's something that's come up in the last 2-3 years at the most.
All right. Well, Matt, I appreciate it. You take care, man.
All right. Thanks.